November 24th, 1221, found a youthful sultan clad in heavy armor on the banks of the Indus River, now within Pakistan's borders, confronting an inescapable choice, a double-edged sword of certain demise. Behind him lay tens of thousands of his troops, fallen in crimson pools. Ahead, 50,000 Mongol cavalry, led by Genghis Khan, advanced like an implacable tide of metal. The only barrier separating him from inevitable death was the surging Indus River, nearly 20 feet deep, deeper than a two-story structure. This was Jalal ad-Din Mangburni, the 22-year-old ruler of the Khwarezmian Empire. Just a few months prior, he had achieved an unprecedented feat, something no other commander would have dared contemplate. He had bested Genghis Khan, the man widely considered unbeatable, with an army hastily assembled from scattered refugees, farmers, and the remnants of his shattered domain. However, all hope now seemed extinguished. His family had been apprehended, his military forces had disintegrated, and Genghis Khan himself had arrived, seeking personal vengeance. So, what sequence of events led to this? How could a collection of refugees overcome the most formidable empire of its era? And why was that triumph insufficient to shield them from their ultimate tragic fate? Today, we will delve into one of history's most poignant and inspiring narratives, a tale of hope, valor, and the immense cost exacted when confronting the most merciless war machine of its time. But before we embark, I'd like to hear from you. Where are you viewing this video from, and what time is it there right now? Whether in Vietnam, the United States, Europe, or anywhere else globally, please share in the comments below so we can gauge the worldwide reach of our history-loving community. Now, let me transport you back to an era when Central Asia served as the hub of civilizations, when the Silk Road funneled unimaginable riches into ancient metropolises, and when one individual's ambition would incinerate that paradise. This is more than merely an account of warfare. It's a testament to what occurs when ordinary individuals are compelled to transcend into the extraordinary. It explores the meaning of resistance when opposition appears futile, and it poses a question that continues to reverberate through time. Is it preferable to perish fighting on your feet than to exist on your knees? Remain with me until the conclusion, as the answer to this query might astonish you, and the wisdom embedded in this narrative is as pertinent today as it was 800 years ago. To grasp this story fully, we must journey back to 1219, a period when Central Asia still ranked among the world's most prosperous regions. The Khwarezmian Empire was not an ancient kingdom. It had been established only a few decades earlier when the leaders of Khorasan capitalized on the decline of the Seljuk Empire to broaden their territories. In the late 12th century, under Shartek's command, Khwarezm swiftly conquered vital cities such as Nishapur, Mv, and ultimately, by 1194, the Seljuk capital of Hamadan. This empire stretched from Hamadan in the west to Nishapur in the east, controlling a significant portion of the Silk Road. Shartek's son, Shah Muhammad II, succeeded him in 1200 and sustained the expansion. By 1219, the empire encompassed present-day Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Iran, Afghanistan, and parts of Kazakhstan, with an estimated population of approximately 2 million. However, this was a nascent empire plagued by numerous internal issues. Shah Muhammad harbored distrust towards most of his generals. His mother, the influential Queen Mother Turkin Khatun, still wielded immense power, frequently meddling in political decisions and thus fomenting court conflicts. Simultaneously, in the northeast, a new force was emerging. In 1206, Temujin, or as he is famously known, Genghis Khan, had united the Mongol tribes under a single banner. This was no mere unification. Genghis Khan had forged a groundbreaking military system. The army was no longer structured along tribal or familial lines, but rather into decimal units, 10, 100, 1,000, and 10,000 men, known as tundans. Every warrior was a mounted archer, trained from childhood, capable of remarkable accuracy even at a full gallop. Mongol strategies centered on speed, maneuverability, and psychological warfare. They employed feigned retreats to draw enemies out of formation, then encircled and obliterated them. Their policy was also brutally clear. Any city that resisted would be utterly annihilated, serving as a grim warning to others. By 1218, the Mongols had triumphed over Western Xia and were menacing the Jin dynasty in China. The Mongol Empire now shared a border with Khwarezm. Initially, Genghis Khan aimed to forge trade connections with Khwarezm. In 1218, he dispatched a trade caravan of around 450 individuals, laden with valuable goods, to the border city of Otrar. Yet Inalchuk, Otrar's governor, suspected this caravan comprised spies. He ordered the apprehension and execution of the entire caravan, along with the confiscation of all their possessions. Genghis Khan was enraged but still sought a diplomatic resolution. He dispatched another delegation, demanding that Shah Muhammad punish Inalchuk and provide restitution. However, Shah Muhammad defied the demand, executing the primary envoy and humiliating the remaining ambassadors by shaving their beards before sending them away. This act was considered the ultimate affront within Mongol customs. As a result, Genghis Khan convened a war council. Historians recount his solitary retreat to a mountaintop for 3 days, spent in contemplation and prayer, after which he declared his intention to utterly devastate Khwarezm. In the winter of 1219, Genghis Khan led his forces across the formidable Tian Shan Mountains. Estimates for the size of his army vary widely among historians, ranging from 75,000 to 200,000, with a more probable figure lying between 100,000 and 150,000, which included skilled Chinese siege engineers. The army was divided into 4 divisions. His eldest son, Jochi, commanded troops to the northeast. His 2 sons, Chagatai and Ogadai, initiated a siege on Otrar, while Genghis Khan himself, alongside his youngest son Tolui, guided the main contingent westward. Facing this oncoming threat, Shah Muhammad had to make a critical choice. Despite having a sizable military, estimated at 400,000 soldiers, these were scattered garrison units dispersed across his vast empire. He worried that concentrating his forces for a direct confrontation on the open plains would lead to defeat by the Mongols' superior mobile warfare tactics. Consequently, the Shah opted for a defense-in-depth strategy, positioning his garrisons in key cities such as Otrar, Bukhara, Samarkand, and Gurganj. While strategically sound in theory, this approach contained a critical flaw. The Mongols could systematically apply overwhelming force against each city in succession, which is precisely what transpired. Otrar, the city where the conflict originated, became the first target. Chagatai and Ogadai besieged it with 50,000 troops. Governor Inalchuk, responsible for the massacre of the trade caravan, commanded 20,000 defenders. The siege lasted through the winter months, and in February 1220, the city walls were breached. Inalchuk retreated into the inner citadel, fighting fiercely until his capture. He was then executed by having molten silver poured into his eyes and ears, a symbolic retribution for the avarice that ignited the war. Concurrently, while Otrar still resisted, Genghis Khan rapidly advanced his principal force westward. Contrary to expectations, he bypassed Samarkand initially, instead making a sudden appearance at the gates of Bukhara. Bukhara was a vital cultural and religious hub in the Islamic world at that time, defended by approximately 20,000 garrison troops. However, faced with the sheer scale of the Mongol army, most of the garrison attempted to break out and flee, only to be mostly intercepted and killed outside the city. The remaining elders and scholars surrendered the city, hoping to avert its destruction. Genghis Khan entered the city, reportedly declaring in the Great Mosque, "I am the punishment of God. If you had not committed great sins, God would not have sent a punishment like me upon you." The populace was commanded to evacuate, after which the Mongol army systematically plundered the city. Libraries holding countless valuable manuscripts were incinerated, skilled craftsmen were enslaved, and the rest of the city was laid to waste. This systematic pattern of conquest, capturing a city, classifying its inhabitants, enslaving skilled laborers, executing resistors, and razing the city as a warning, became a hallmark of Mongol campaigns. After Bukhara, Genghis Khan proceeded to Samarkand, the capital and largest city of Khwarezm, with a population of around 100,000. This city boasted 110,000 defenders, including war elephants from India. However, Shah Muhammad was absent. Upon hearing of Bukhara's fall, he panicked and fled westward, abandoning both his capital and his army. This proved to be a catastrophic decision. When his soldiers learned of the emperor's flight, their morale disintegrated. Genghis Khan then besieged Samarkand with approximately 150,000 troops, marking the first time he concentrated his entire army on a single objective. On the initial day of the siege, 50,000 garrison troops attempted a breakout, only to be ambushed and almost entirely annihilated. After only 5 days, the city leaders capitulated. The civilian population was ordered out, and the Mongol army engaged in extensive plundering. Skilled individuals, such as goldsmiths, blacksmiths, and architects, were preserved. Others were sorted, some into slavery, others pressed into service as human shields for future assaults, and many were killed. Meanwhile, Shah Muhammad continued his flight westward with his eldest son, Jalal al-Din Mangburni, and a small retinue of guards. Genghis Khan dispatched his 2 most accomplished generals, Jibi and Subutai, with 30,000 cavalry to pursue him. This pursuit became one of the longest in history. Jibi and Subutai relentlessly hunted the Shah through Nishapur, Tus, and various Persian cities including Qazvin and Ardabil. Every city that refused to open its doors to the fleeing Shah was subsequently ravaged by the Mongols. Finally, in the winter of 1220, Shah Muhammad sought refuge on a small island in the Caspian Sea, completely drained both physically and mentally. Just weeks later, he succumbed to dysentery on that island, isolated and deserted by all. Before his death, he designated Jalal al-Din Mangburni as his successor, though by then, virtually nothing remained of the empire to inherit. The former capital of Khwarezm and the empire's wealthiest urban center was Gorgan. It was defended by 50,000 soldiers under Queen Mother Turkin Khatun. Genghis Khan's 3 sons, Yachi, Chagatai, and Agade, were tasked with conquering this city, but their cooperation was lacking. Yachi and Chagatai were locked in a personal dispute over tactical approaches. Genghis Khan had to deploy Ogedei as a mediator. The siege endured for 5 months, making it the longest engagement of the entire campaign. Garange possessed formidable defenses and high morale. However, in the spring of 1221, the Mongol forces breached the dikes, allowing the Amu Darya River to inundate portions of the city. Upon the city's capitulation, the Mongol army carried out a horrific massacre. The urban combat persisted for many days. Historians of the era documented hundreds of thousands of fatalities, though this figure might be exaggerated. Undeniably, Gorgan suffered such thorough destruction that its recovery spanned decades. While the 3 brothers were besieging Gorgan, Tolui, Genghis Khan's youngest son, was assigned to pacify the Khorasan region to the south. Tolui commanded only about 7,000 regular Mongol troops, but he augmented his forces by compelling civilians from already conquered cities to join. This was a brutal strategy, employing people from one city to assault another. MV was the initial target, a city then considered one of the largest globally, with an estimated population ranging from 100,000 to 200,000. The city also sheltered tens of thousands of refugees who had fled from other areas. In April 1221, after a 6-day siege, MV's governor surrendered on the condition that its inhabitants be spared. Tolui pledged to eliminate only the 12,000 garrison troops. Yet when the populace exited the city, the Mongol army encircled them and commenced a systematic slaughter. Each Mongol soldier was ordered to execute 300 to 400 individuals. Many soldiers in Tu's army hailed from Sarak, a city with a long-standing animosity towards MV. They massacred their fellow Muslims with a savagery that surpassed even that of the Mongols. Based on survivor accounts, Arab historian Ibn Alafa estimated 700,000 deaths at MV. This figure, however, was undoubtedly overstated, as the city could not have sustained such a population. Nonetheless, even if the actual count was merely 100,000 or 200,000, this still constituted one of history's largest massacres. Next came Nishapur. This city had initially surrendered, but subsequently rebelled against Mongol dominance. In retaliation, and also because Takucha, Genghis Khan's son-in-law, had perished there, the Mongol army executed a vengeful massacre. Genghis Khan's daughter was granted authority to issue the execution decree. She demanded that every living being in the city, including canines and felines, be decapitated and their skulls arranged into pyramids. The city was completely razed. Herat experienced a similar destiny. By mid-1221, nearly all of Khorasan had been transformed into a wasteland. Irrigation systems built over centuries were demolished. The land that had served as Central Asia's breadbasket became desert. Many areas never recuperated. This was not merely warfare, it was the deliberate dismantling of a civilization. It was amidst this catastrophic environment that a young man resolved to resist and fight back. Jalal Alin Mangi was born in 1199, the eldest child of Shah Muhammad II. However, his life was fraught with challenges from its inception. His mother, a Czech, was a Turkmen slave. Within Khwarezmian society at that time, his mother's humble origins meant that Jalalin was not perceived as the rightful successor. His grandmother, the formidable Queen Mother Turkin Khatun, harbored animosity towards him and championed another son, Usuzlog Shah, born to a Kipchak princess. In 1215, Shah Muhammad fragmented the empire among his offspring. Jalal Alin received the southwestern territories, regions formerly part of the Ghurid Empire, roughly corresponding to modern Afghanistan. While not the wealthiest domain, this area became his power base. In contrast to his father, who was indecisive and hesitant, Jalal Alin was renowned for his bravery and military prowess. He had participated in at least one conflict under his father's command, displaying exceptional skill. On one occasion, when Shah Muhammad was on the verge of defeat in a minor skirmish with Genghis Khan's son, Yachi, it was Jalalin's military astuteness that salvaged the situation. Nevertheless, Genghis Khan paid little heed to this small engagement, choosing to disregard it, a miscalculation he would recall years later. When Shah Muhammad died on the Caspian Island in December 1220, he designated Jalal al-Din as his successor. Yet, the empire by then was merely a name. Jalal al-Din attempted to reach Garange, the former capital where the Queen Mother wielded authority. However, she and the nobility refused to acknowledge him, still intent on installing Uslak Shah on the throne. Jalal al-Din uncovered a conspiracy to assassinate him. He was compelled to flee the city under the cover of night with only a small contingent of loyal guards. This was arguably the most desolate period of his existence. His father was deceased, the empire lay in ruins, his family had forsaken him, and the Mongols were systematically laying waste to every city. While many would have opted for distant refuge, Jalal Alin turned eastward, heading for Afghanistan and his former power base, aiming to rally the remaining resistance. Traversing the formidable Karakum Desert, he encountered and vanquished a minor Mongol detachment near Nessa, reportedly killing two brothers of Togachar, Genghis Khan's son-in-law. This engagement signaled his defiance, indicating he wouldn't yield. By April 1221, Jalal Alin reached Ghazni, where an extraordinary event unfolded. He discovered 50,000 individuals awaiting his arrival. These were loyal Khwarezmians, veterans of his father's campaigns, and Afghans resolute in defending their homeland. Not a professional military, this assembly comprised farmers, artisans, merchants, people who had lost everything to the Mongols, refugees and survivors with nothing left to lose. Yet, they possessed one crucial element: hope. Jalal Alin embodied this aspiration. He was the Shah's son, courageous, and, unlike his father, unwilling to flee. Critically, he was prepared to fight. Days later, his uncle, Timur Malik, arrived with 30,000 seasoned warriors. Timur Malik, an experienced general, brought not only troops but also crucial expertise and military order. To solidify this alliance, Jalal ad-Din married Malik's daughter, a union that transcended mere political expediency, symbolizing the solidarity of their remaining forces. Jalal ad-Din now commanded an estimated 60,000 to 65,000 people. On paper, this represented a formidable power. However, the reality was more intricate. This army was a loose amalgamation: Khwarezmians loyal to the monarchy, Turkic fighters under Timur Malik, Afghan tribes defending their lands, and Khalaj and Korlak peoples driven by their own motives, alongside thousands of refugees seeking retribution. They lacked uniform attire, hadn't trained collectively, and many had never wielded weapons. Nonetheless, their fight for survival provided a profound incentive. Jalal ad-Din acted swiftly upon learning that Kandahar was under siege by a Mongol contingent. He led his forces there, and after 2 days of intense combat, they emerged victorious, breaking the siege and freeing the city from Mongol control, a first. News of this triumph spread, igniting a spark of hope. Next, he advanced north to Wan, another besieged city. There, Mongol forces were commanded by generals Tichik and Molga. Jalal ad-Din executed a surprise assault, overpowering both armies and inflicting approximately 1,000 Mongol casualties. These two victories, though localized, held immense significance, shattering the perception of Mongol invincibility. Thousands more Afghans from the region flocked to Jalal ad-Din's banner after learning of the tragic fate of Bamiyan, where Genghis Khan's grandson had been killed and the entire city massacred. Their stark realization was that inaction meant death, making a defiant battle their preferable end. Reports of Jalal ad-Din's successes reached Genghis Khan during his siege of Taloqan. Initially unconcerned, dismissing them as minor skirmishes far from central command, Genghis Khan took notice when he heard that Jalal ad-Din was amassing a substantial force and advancing towards Parwan near Kabul. Realizing the growing menace, he concluded he had to intervene. Unwilling to abandon his northern campaign, he dispatched his adopted son, Shigi Kutuku, with 30,000 to 50,000 troops to address the situation. Shigi Kutuku was not an incompetent general. As the Chief Justice of the Mongol Empire, he possessed intelligence and loyalty. However, he lacked combat experience, having never commanded a large army in a decisive engagement. Moreover, his adversary was no ordinary foe. Jalal ad-Din had shrewdly chosen the battlefield, the Parwan Valley, located approximately 50 miles north of Kabul. In the autumn of 1221, the two armies converged. On one side stood the seemingly unstoppable Mongol war machine, which had laid waste to half the world. Facing them was a band of refugees led by a 22-year-old. Few believed the refugees had a chance, yet history often holds surprises. The Parwan Valley was a deliberate choice by Jalal ad-Din. This narrow gorge, nestled within the Hindu Kush Mountains, measured only a few hundred meters wide at certain points, flanked by high ridges and rough, rocky terrain. Behind it lay mountain passes providing potential escape routes back to Kabul and Ghazni. This topography was crucial because it neutralized the Mongols' primary advantage, their ability to maneuver and execute encirclement tactics. Mongol cavalry required vast, open spaces to move freely, surround adversaries from multiple directions, and feign retreats. In this constricted valley, such maneuvers were impossible. They were forced into frontal combat, a style alien to them. Furthermore, the uneven, rocky ground impeded archers attempting to shoot accurately from horseback, and horses themselves struggled to maintain footing. This taught a fundamental military truth: never engage on an adversary's preferred battleground. Jalal ad-Din had skillfully transformed the Parwan Valley into precisely that for himself. With September's arrival and the armies poised for confrontation, Jalal ad-Din recognized the decisive nature of the moment. Victory could ignite widespread resistance across the empire. Defeat meant utter destruction. Yet his resolve was firm. Fighting to the death was preferable to living in subjugation. The stage was thus set for one of history's most extraordinary encounters. The choice of the Parwan Valley wasn't arbitrary. Jalal ad-Din had selected it with meticulous strategic foresight. This narrow geographical feature was tightly enclosed by the Hindu Kush mountain ranges, with its width shrinking to only a few hundred meters at certain points. Towering ridges and jagged rocky terrain flanked both sides. Behind lay mountain trails that provided potential escape routes back to Kabul and Ghazni if needed. The significance of this terrain was profound. It entirely neutralized the Mongols' primary advantage, their superior mobility and flanking maneuvers. Mongol cavalry required expansive, open areas to execute their encirclement tactics and renowned feigned retreats. Within this constricted valley, such strategies were impossible. They were forced into direct confrontation, a type of combat they assiduously sought to avoid. Moreover, the rugged, uneven ground rendered accurate archery from horseback exceedingly difficult, as horses struggled to maintain their footing on the treacherous surface. This exemplified military genius at its core, compelling your foe to fight on terms advantageous to you, not them. And Jalal ad-Din had fortified the Parwan Valley for this very purpose. Jalal ad-Din meticulously arranged his forces to maximize the topographical benefits. At the core, he personally commanded 5,000 elite soldiers, including 700 royal guards. This robust contingent was his primary reserve, ready to bolster any vulnerable point. On the left flank, Afghan warriors occupied a ridge that descended directly to a river, creating an impregnable defensive line with elevated ground on one side and water on the other, making flanking maneuvers nearly impossible. The right flank featured Turk warriors, led by Timur Malik and his uncle Amin Malik, who were highly seasoned fighters adept at rapid movements when necessary. Infantry units were strategically placed on elevated positions throughout the valley, poised to unleash arrows and stones upon any encroaching enemy. This was a tightly knit defensive formation. Jalal ad-Din understood that he couldn't overcome the Mongols in mobile warfare, so he compelled them into a battle they were ill-prepared to wage. In September 1221, Shigi Kutuku arrived with his forces. Historical accounts vary regarding their exact numbers. Juvani cited 30,000, Jujani claimed 45,000, and Aban Abdallah al-Umari estimated 70,000. Scholars generally agree the actual strength was likely between 30,000 and 40,000, still a formidable army. Upon observing Jalal ad-Din's army arrayed in the valley, Shigi Kutuku immediately recognized the terrain as a trap. However, he faced another dilemma. Retreating without a fight was unacceptable in Mongol culture, viewed as an act of cowardice. Furthermore, Genghis Khan had explicitly tasked him with eliminating Jalal ad-Din, so returning empty-handed was not an option. Thus, he decided to attack. The battle commenced with a Mongol reconnaissance in force, as a cavalry unit advanced into the valley to test enemy reactions. Jalal ad-Din remained steadfast, holding his troops in position and permitting only enough archer fire to repulse the probe. Shigi Kutuku then escalated, committing larger contingents deeper into the valley. His strategy was to entice Jalal ad-Din's army out of their entrenched positions, where they could be surrounded. Yet, Jalal ad-Din steadfastly refused to move. Instead, as the Mongol forces ventured deeper, he signaled simultaneous attacks from both wings. Turk cavalry from the right flank charged down, striking the Mongol flank, while Afghan warriors from the high ground on the left also engaged. Infantry from the surrounding heights rained down a barrage of arrows and stones. The Mongol forces found themselves in dire straits. The constricted space prevented them from deploying their customary formations. Horses stumbled on the rocky terrain, and archers struggled to shoot accurately as their mounts lost balance. Crucially, they were now being assailed from multiple directions within a confined area, precisely the tactic they typically employed against others, but now turned against them. After several hours of intense combat, Shigi Kutuku ordered a withdrawal. The first day concluded without a decisive victor, yet morale within Jalal al-Din's army soared. They had successfully repelled the Mongols. That night, both sides prepared for the following day. Shigi Kutuk convened his officers to discuss strategy, acknowledging that a direct frontal assault in the valley was unwinnable. Their plan for Day 2 would involve the famed Mongol feigned retreat. They would attack, then simulate panic and flee, hoping that Jalal al-Din's troops would become overconfident and pursue them, abandoning their defensive positions. Then, hidden ambush units would emerge to encircle and annihilate them. This particular strategy had proved successful numerous times, demanding stringent discipline. Soldiers needed to conduct an orderly withdrawal without succumbing to actual panic. It consistently deceived adversaries because human psychology instinctively compels pursuit of a fleeing foe. Meanwhile, Jalal al-Din was making his own preparations. He understood that the Mongols would intensify their offensive on the morrow. He was also aware of their feigned retreat maneuver. He was not naive. He cautioned his commanders, "No one is to abandon their position unless I issue the command. Should the Mongols withdraw, do not pursue them. Maintain formation." At the break of dawn on the second day, Shigi Kutuk launched an unreserved offensive, bypassing any preliminary skirmishes. Thousands of Mongol cavalry streamed into the valley from multiple directions, yelling and loosing arrows. The reverberation of thousands of hoofbeats on stony terrain must have been profoundly unnerving. This was the war machine that had razed countless cities and brought empires to their knees. Yet Jalalin's forces held their ground. Infantry showered arrows from elevated positions, while cavalry on both flanks remained poised for a counterattack. Shigi Kutuk relentlessly pressed the assault, continuously reinforcing his troops. He concentrated on Jalal al-Din's left wing, where Afghan warriors held the ridge. His aim was to seize this position to encircle the entire Khwarezmian army. However, the Afghan warriors fought with the desperate resolve of those defending their homeland, knowing that failure meant death for themselves and their families. They maintained their stance despite continuous waves of Mongol attacks. On the right flank, even Ogadai, one of Genghis Khan's sons commanding a segment of the Mongol force, was repelled by Tiam Malik's fierce counteroffensive. After hours of fruitless fighting, Shigi Kutuk initiated his reserve plan, the staged retreat. Abruptly, Mongol troops reined in their horses and galloped out of the valley, feigning disarray. Some even discarded weapons to accelerate their flight. This presented the most perilous moment for Jalalin's army. Many, especially young, inexperienced fighters, yearned to chase. They saw an opportunity to annihilate the enemy. But Jalal bellowed, to Timur Malik, and the seasoned commanders also managed to keep their troops firmly in check. Discipline prevailed. No one abandoned their defensive posts. Shigi Kutuk waited, anticipating the Khwarezmian troops would give chase, but they did not. The stratagem had failed. Now it was Jalal al-Din's turn. With the Mongols failing to draw him out, they were compelled to attack once more. But this time, their morale was compromised. Their tactics had fallen flat, and they had been fighting all day on unfavorable ground. Jalal recognized the opportune moment. He ordered a controlled counterattack, not a disorganized scramble, but a synchronized push. Turk cavalry from both flanks simultaneously descended, catching Mongol forces in the valley's center. Infantry from higher ground sustained a barrage of arrow fire. Jalal personally led the royal guard forward in the middle. According to al-Nasawi, Jalalin's personal chronicler, the Sultan even fought his way close to Shigi Kutuk's location, compelling him to withdraw. The Mongol army began to falter. They were unaccustomed to being forced back, nor were they used to confined combat. More significantly, they started to question their ability to triumph. Doubt led to hesitation. Hesitation created openings in their formation, which Jalal al-Din ruthlessly exploited. By the close of the second day, the Mongol army commenced a genuine retreat, not a feigned one this time. Shigi Kutuk realized victory was impossible under these circumstances. he commanded an organized withdrawal from the valley. However, an organized retreat in a constrained space under attack is exceedingly difficult. Retreat spiraled into flight, and flight devolved into utter chaos. Jalal al-Din's troops pursued, cutting down those who lagged behind. Some Mongol soldiers attempted to ford the river to escape, but were swept away by the current and drowned. As the sun set, the Parwan Valley was strewn with cadavers. Estimates suggest between 1,000 and 3,000 Mongols had perished, representing their greatest loss in the entire Central Asian campaign. Shigi Kutuk survived, but faced the arduous task of reporting back to Genghis Khan, marking one of the most trying episodes of his life. That night, in Jalal al-Din's encampment, everyone celebrated. They had achieved the impossible. They, a band of refugees, farmers, and hastily assembled soldiers, had vanquished the seemingly invincible army of Genghis Khan. Jalal executed Mongol prisoners and distributed their weapons and armor to his troops as trophies, a symbolic gesture signifying __quote _ 3 _ news of the triumph rapidly disseminated, a shocking revelation that resonated throughout the region. At MV, Kush and Palawan spearheaded a rebellion, reclaiming the city. In Herat, the populace rose up, overthrowing their Mongol overlords. In Bukhara, assaults were launched against Mongol garrisons. A leader of the resistance, Muhammad the Marani, conducted 2 raids on Genghis Khan's camp at Bagland, returning with plunder each time. The triumph at Parwan shattered the notion of Mongol invincibility, signaling their vulnerability and offering a beacon of hope to millions under their dominion. As per Ibn al-Athir, Jalal al-Din dispatched a provocative message to Genghis Khan following the victory. "Where would you like to engage in battle? Inform me, and I shall bring my forces there." This represented the most direct challenge Genghis Khan had ever encountered from an adversary. However, the jubilation of victory was fleeting. That very night of celebration, the seeds of catastrophe were sown. After commemorating their success, the military commanders began to distribute the spoils, a customary practice after every battle where fighters were entitled to their share. A contention arose concerning a white Mongol horse, a rare and magnificent creature. In nomadic cultures, horses were not merely transport, but symbols of status and distinction. Both the Turk warriors, led by Timur Malik, and the Afghan tribesmen under Sif al-Din Igra, coveted this animal. Jalal al-Din attempted to mediate and propose peaceful resolutions, but emotions were already too volatile. This conflict transcended a mere horse. It was about acknowledging who contributed more to the victory, about preserving respect and honor, and about deep-seated tensions within this precarious alliance. The disagreement escalated into a public quarrel, then to physical shoving, and before it could be quelled, someone was injured. Sif al-Din Igra, an influential Afghan chief, felt dishonored. He asserted that Afghans were not receiving due respect and made a fateful choice. He would withdraw his forces. The following morning, Jalal al-Din awoke to the discovery that nearly half his army had disappeared. Sif al-Din Igra had departed with most of the Afghan fighters, numbering around 30,000 individuals. Their departure wasn't solely due to the horse. Deeper concerns lay at its root. They feared reprisal, knowing Genghis Khan would not tolerate this defeat. He would return with an overwhelmingly larger army, leading to a brutal annihilation. Many Afghans wished to return home to safeguard their families rather than continue the battle. There was also a palpable distrust within the alliance. Khoraz and Afghanistan shared no long history of collaboration. Their alliance was born of circumstance, not shared past or mutual trust. They also held differing objectives. While Jalal al-Din aimed to re-establish the Khwarezmian Empire, many Afghans simply sought to defend their homeland, indifferent to retaking Samarkand or Bukhara. Jalal al-Din pleaded with them to remain, cautioning that unity offered greater safety. But Sif al-Din would not be swayed. He led his troops away, and numerous others followed. Overnight, the army dwindled from 60 000 to approximately 30,000. More detrimental than the numerical loss was the blow to morale. Those who stayed felt betrayed, contemplating, quote, 5. Jalal al-Din faced an impossible dilemma. Option 1. Press northward, attempting to reclaim cities that had risen against the Mongols, such as MV and Hat, and rebuild the empire. But with only 30,000 men and Genghis Khan's inevitable return, this seemed a suicidal undertaking. Option 2. Retreat to Ghazni for defense, gather more troops, fortify defenses, and brace for the Mongol counterattack. Yet Ghazni was not an impregnable stronghold, and a prolonged siege would only culminate in defeat. Option 3. Withdraw to India, seek asylum in the Sultanate of Delhi, gather fresh forces, and potentially return later. This appeared to be the safest course. However, each option presented its own challenges, and critically, he could not make this decision alone. He required the consensus of his remaining commanders. After deliberation, the resolution was made. They would return to Ghazni, recruit more people, and then advance toward India if necessary. No one wished to abandon the fight immediately, but they were not so naive as to believe they could vanquish the entire Mongol Empire with just 30,000 men. When news of the Parwan defeat reached Genghis Khan at Talan, he reacted with fury. He summoned Shigi Kutuk to hear the account. According to certain historians, he did not punish Shigi despite the loss, acknowledging Jalal al-Din's clever use of terrain and tactics, but his rage was profound. Genghis Khan made a resolute decision. He would personally lead forces to confront Jalal al-Din. This was no longer a task for delegation, it was a matter of personal honor. He assembled at least 50,000 troops, possibly more, and commenced a march south. This constituted one of the swiftest marches ever executed by the Mongols, traversing the treacherous mountain passes of the Hindu Kush, some routes exceedingly perilous. During this period, his beloved grandson, Mithugin, was killed at Bamiyan by a poisoned arrow in September 1221, a significant personal loss for Genghis Khan. Adhering to tradition, he commanded the massacre of Bamiyan's entire populace and razed the city so completely that it never recovered. The twin blows of military defeat at Parwan and the profound personal sorrow suffered at Bamiyan hardened Genghis Khan's resolve, making him crueler than ever. His aim was not merely to overcome Jalal al-Din, but to eradicate any who dared oppose him. Jalal al-Din guided his remaining 30,000 troops towards Ghazni, but during their journey, unsettling news reached him. Genghis Khan was rapidly advancing southward with an immense army, and he wasn't alone. Tului was also leading forces from the west, having completed the devastation in Khorasan. Jalal al-Din recognized that Ghazni could not be held. Being besieged there would condemn them to a grim end. Their only option was to press eastward towards the Indus River, and from there to India. However, a significant complication arose. His army wasn't composed solely of 30,000 soldiers. Accompanying them were thousands, possibly tens of thousands of refugees, women, children, the elderly, and warriors' families. Abandoning these individuals was unthinkable, yet traveling with such a large multitude would be agonizingly slow, and speed was paramount. This was an intractable dilemma. Remaining meant certain death. Fleeing without the refugees might save the army, but would entail abandoning their kin. Fleeing with them would ensure a slow pace, risking capture. Jalal al-Din selected a third path, to attempt to escape with everyone, despite understanding the slim prospects of success. This was a choice rooted in honor and allegiance to his people, rather than calculated military strategy. While this decision may have enshrined him as a hero historically, it also set the stage for the ultimate catastrophe. In late September or early October of 1221, Jalal al-Din departed Ghazni with 30,000 soldiers and an estimated 10,000 to 20,000 refugees. Some accounts suggest fewer, but the actual number was likely considerably higher. Their path lay eastward, toward the Indus River. The journey from Ghazni to the Indus, roughly 400 kilometers over treacherous mountain terrain, typically took an army 2 to 3 weeks under normal circumstances. Yet these were far from normal conditions. They had to navigate with women, children, and old people, burdened with food, water, and their worldly possessions, severely impeding their pace. Trailing fast behind them was Genghis Khan with 50,000 cavalry, arguably one of the most agile forces the world had ever witnessed. Along their arduous route, the column confronted numerous obstacles. The challenging landscape necessitated traversing perilous mountain passes, extensions of the Hindu Kush ranges. Many sections were so narrow that only one person could pass at a time, rendering defense or retreat impossible if attacked. The weather turned unforgiving as late autumn brought chilling temperatures to the high mountains. Many lacked adequate warm clothing, and widespread illness began to afflict children and the elderly. Sustaining tens of thousands of people demanded immense daily food provisions. They were forced to forage, but the mountainous regions offered scarce resources, leading to starvation among some. Morale plummeted as the omnipresent threat of Mongol pursuit loomed, fueling widespread fear. Some wished to break away, seeking their own means of survival. Jalal continually had to reassure them, emphasizing that their only hope lay in unity. Painful choices punctuated their journey. Some individuals could not keep pace. The elderly were too frail to continue, the sick too weak. Parents faced the agonizing decision of abandoning loved ones or slowing the entire column, risking capture for all. There were no easy answers, only heart-wrenching compromises. Meanwhile, Genghis Khan's forces encountered none of these difficulties. His army, comprised of seasoned professional soldiers, was accustomed to protracted, rapid movements. They carried ample provisions, had spare horses, and were unburdened by refugees. Each day, the distance separating the two armies dwindled. Every morning upon waking, Jalal would gaze back, spotting dust clouds on the horizon, a clear indication of the approaching army. He understood they likely wouldn't reach the Indus River before the Mongols overtook them. But if they could draw close to the river, a slim possibility of crossing might emerge before they were completely ensnared. Scattered skirmishes erupted along the way. Jalal's rearguard frequently engaged the Mongol vanguard, buying precious time for the main column to advance. Many valiant warriors sacrificed their lives in these desperate engagements. In late November 1221, Jalal's column arrived at the banks of the Indus River near what is now Calabar, Pakistan. However, arrived is an overly optimistic term. They were driven to the river, with Mongol forces encircling them from 3 directions. The Indus River at this point was broad and swift-flowing. Thanks to recent rains, the water was high and the current powerful, reaching depths of approximately 20 feet in many areas. There were no bridges, no ferries, and no time to construct rafts. Jalal surveyed his surroundings. Before him lay the river. Behind and on both flanks, Genghis Khan's encircling formation closed in. Escape was impossible. He observed the Mongol forces preparing for their final assault. They were unhurried, understanding their quarry had nowhere to go. They had ample time to orchestrate a flawless attack, intending a total annihilation. Among the Mongol ranks, astride a white horse, rode Genghis Khan himself. This was the man who had laid claim to the majority of the known world, a leader yet to suffer a true defeat in any battle he personally directed. The night of November 23, 1221, in Jalal-ad-Din's encampment, was devoid of celebration, unlike the aftermath of Parwan. Only a pervasive silence and dread hung in the air. Everyone sensed that the coming day might well be their last. Parents clasped their children tightly, while husbands and wives intertwined their hands. Warriors, with trembling fingers, readied their weapons. Jalal-ad-Din called his commanders to him. Among them was his steadfast uncle, Amin Malik, and another uncle whose loyalty remained unwavering. Also present were the brave few who had journeyed with him from Ghazni to this very spot. "Brothers," Jalal-ad-Din began, delivering what historians describe as a concise yet emotionally charged address. Tomorrow, we confront the mightiest empire the world has ever witnessed. They outnumber us 2-1. They surpass us in every conceivable way, and we have no means of retreat. Many will suggest our fight is over, that we have failed, and that surrender and pleas for mercy are our only recourse. However, I tell you, we have come too far. We bested them once at Parwan, proving their supposed invincibility is a myth. Tomorrow, death likely awaits us. Yet, we will fall as free warriors, not as chattel. We will perish defending those we love, not kneeling in supplication. And if divine will permits, perhaps we shall endure. Perhaps a miracle will unfold. But regardless of whether we live or die, our names will echo through time. Generations will recount the tale of us, those who dared to face Genghis Khan and never yielded. In the stark quiet of that night on the banks of the Indus River, these words offered a measure of solace, not abundant, but just enough to face the dawn. As night surrendered to morning, the camp stirred with anxious preparations. Fathers bestowed what might be their final kisses upon their children. Warriors honed blades destined to taste blood before the sun again set. Refugees huddled together, offering prayers to any deity they still believed in. Jalal ad-Din moved amongst his people, observing not only the fear in their eyes, but also a quiet, resolute determination. They had journeyed too far to capitulate now. They would ensure the Mongols paid dearly for every life extinguished. Across the river, Mongol campfires flickered in the pre-dawn gloom. 50,000 warriors were poised to write the ultimate chapter of the Khwarezmian Empire. But history, in its peculiar fashion, held one final surprise, an event destined to resonate through the ages, an act of courage so profound that even the era's most formidable conqueror would pause in admiration. The stage was set for the Battle of the Indus, the climactic encounter between an irresistible force and an unyielding spirit of defiance. With the rising sun, two armies stood opposed on the Indus's banks. On one side, the disciplined might of the Mongol Empire; on the other, the desperate hope of a people with everything to lose. Jalal ad-Din strategically arrayed his forces. He personally commanded the center, comprising 5,000 elite troops, including 700 guards. His right wing was led by Amin Malik with Turk warriors. The left wing, under Timur Malik, consisted of the remaining Afghan warriors, anchored to a small ridge that sloped towards the river. Behind them, refugees gathered near the riverbank, some desperately attempting to cross. Jalal ad-Din leveraged the restricted terrain to anchor both flanks to the river, aiming to mitigate the risk of encirclement. However, the expanse here far exceeded that of the Parwan Valley, allowing the Mongols to deploy their full strength. Unlike Shigi Kutuk at Parwan, Genghis Khan exercised caution. He meticulously positioned his forces. He personally commanded the reserve in the center, ensuring Jalal ad-Din could not force a breakthrough. His son, Chagatai, led the right wing, while his son, Ogadai, commanded the left. Multiple cavalry squadrons were designated as encirclement units, tasked with gradually enveloping and tightening the noose. This formation was not for a swift triumph, but for absolute annihilation, intended to leave no survivors. At dawn, the Mongol forces charged. Unlike Parwan, this time they held an overwhelming advantage in both space and numbers. Initially, Jalal ad-Din's troops displayed remarkable bravery. The left wing steadfastly held the ridge, even as Genghis Khan continuously committed more troops, having learned from Parwan the critical importance of elevated positions. On the right wing, Amin Malik also fought ferociously, even managing to repulse Ogadai during the initial phase. In the center, Jalal ad-Din spearheaded counterattacks. According to al-Nasawi, in what might be an exaggeration, he reportedly even advanced close to Genghis Khan, briefly forcing the Khan to fall back. Yet, these moments of heroism could not alter the stark mathematical reality. 30,000 against 50,000, with no escape and disadvantageous terrain. Acknowledging the formidable strength of Jalal ad-Din's left-wing position on the ridge, Genghis Khan dispatched General Balagan with an elite tumen of 10,000 warriors to ascend behind the ridge and launch an attack from above. This was a strenuous undertaking, involving climbing mountains laden with weapons and armor, then assaulting downhill on treacherous ground. Nevertheless, Mongol troops were rigorously trained for such arduous missions. As Belanoan's forces became visible behind the left flank, the Afghan fighters recognized their precarious position, realizing they were being encircled. Panic began to ripple through their ranks, and their formations started to falter. Perceiving the imminent danger, Jalal ad-Din, at the head of his personal guard, launched a desperate charge into the Mongol center, attempting to carve out an escape route. During this tumultuous engagement, his steadfast and valiant uncle, Timur Malik, met his end. With Timur Malik slain and the left flank compromised, the entire formation swiftly disintegrated. The Mongols relentlessly tightened their grip from three directions, pushing Jalal ad-Din's remaining troops relentlessly towards the river. The battlefield devolved into absolute pandemonium. Soldiers valiantly tried to maintain their ground, while terrified refugees desperately attempted to cross the river. Many succumbed to the powerful currents, drowning, while others were cut down on the riverbank. Jalal ad-Din grasped the undeniable truth: the battle was irretrievably lost. Victory was unattainable. The only remaining question was how he would face his demise. Amidst the chaos, with his family captured, his army crumbling, and thousands being slaughtered, Jalal ad-Din made a monumental choice. He spurred his heavily armored horse towards the river's edge. Before him lay a sheer drop, a cliff face of approximately 20 to 25 feet, plummeting directly into the raging Indus. Logically, this path offered certain death. Jumping in full armor guaranteed immediate submersion. Yet, remaining meant an equally certain and far more ignominious end. Witnessing this, Jalal ad-Din, with a surge of determination, urged his horse onward and leaped from the cliff into the river below. Horse and rider soared through the air for what felt like an eternity before crashing into the water with a colossal splash. Genghis Khan, observing the battle from a distance, witnessed this extraordinary feat. He turned to his sons and uttered words that would forever echo through history. Quote 9. Subsequently, tradition claims, he instructed his archers not to target Jalal ad-Din, an acknowledgement of his enemy's remarkable valor. Jalal ad-Din resurfaced, managed to shed some of his heavy armor, and began to swim across the river. The powerful current dragged him downstream, but he fought with every ounce of his strength to reach the opposite bank. Though we in hindsight know he survived, at that precise moment, his fate was utterly uncertain. It was an act of incredible bravery and desperation, almost beyond comprehension. On the river's near side, the brutal massacre continued unchecked. The Mongol forces showed no quarter. The remaining army was utterly annihilated. Thousands of refugees, women, children, and the elderly, were mercilessly put to death. Jalal ad-Din's family fell into captivity. All possessions, all treasures, everything that remained of the Khwarezmian Empire was seized by the Mongols. Estimates suggest that between 20,000 and 30,000 lives were lost in this battle and the ensuing carnage. The precise toll will forever be unknown, but it undoubtedly represented one of the campaign's most horrific disasters. When quiet finally descended, the banks of the Indus bore a crimson stain. Genghis Khan had achieved his decisive victory. The Khwarezmian Empire was now officially defunct. But one man had defied fate and crossed the river, and his narrative was far from concluded. Jalal ad-Din successfully traversed the river. However, he emerged an utterly defeated individual, having lost his family, his army, his empire, everything. He sought sanctuary with Sultan Iltutmish of Delhi, but was refused. The Sultan was unwilling to risk an altercation with the formidable Mongols. This decision, while pragmatic, was also undeniably cruel. Jalal ad-Din was forced to establish a small power base in Punjab and Sindh. He engaged in raids on various cities, amassed new troops, and lived the life of a warlord for 3 years. In 1224, following Genghis Khan's departure from the region to resume his campaigns against the Jin and Western Shah, Jalal ad-Din resolved to return to Persia. He assembled a new army and actually experienced some limited successes, reclaiming territory in Persia and the Caucasus. For a few years, it appeared he might indeed resurrect a diminished version of his father's empire. However, he never commanded sufficient strength to genuinely challenge the Mongols. Furthermore, he inadvertently created numerous new adversaries, including the Seljuk Empire, the Ayyubid states, and various local chieftains. In 1230, he suffered a defeat at the hands of Sultan Kaikubad I of the Seljuks at the Battle of Yasachman. In 1231, while fleeing through the Diyarbakir Mountains, he was brutally assassinated by a Kurd, possibly a highwayman or a professional killer. Jalal ad-Din died at the age of 32 in the mountains, far from his loved ones and his homeland, but he died as an unyielding warrior who never capitulated. So, what was the ultimate significance of all this? Jalal ad-Din was vanquished. The Khwarezmian Empire was obliterated. Millions perished. Khorasan never fully recovered. Genghis Khan continued his conquests, forging the largest empire in human history. Yet Jalal ad-Din bequeathed something enduring: hope. The Battle of Parwan demonstrated that the Mongols were not unconquerable. It proved that with astute tactics, advantageous terrain, and sheer bravery, even a smaller force could triumph. Jalal ad-Din's saga inspired countless others to resist the Mongols in subsequent years. In Vietnam, Tren Hung Dao meticulously studied battles against the Mongols and drew valuable lessons. In Egypt, the Mamluks similarly analyzed and applied comparable strategies to decisively defeat the Mongols in 1260. Most profoundly, this narrative serves as a powerful reminder of the fundamental nature of human courage. Sometimes, the ultimate victory isn't merely the final outcome. Victory manifests in the act of persevering when all others have capitulated. Victory lies in the resolute decision to fight when all rational thought dictates surrender. The narrative of Jalal ad-Din and his 60,000 refugees offers profound insights into effective leadership. A true leader isn't defined by an unbroken streak of victories, but rather by their readiness to stand and fight for their people, even when the odds are gravely stacked against them. Jalal ad-Din had the option to desert his fleeing countrymen and save himself, significantly boosting his chances of survival. Yet, he chose a different path. This account also highlights the crucial role of tactical understanding. Geography can level the playing field between a formidable military and a weaker one. The events at Parwan demonstrated how leveraging environmental features can counteract superior numbers and experience. This strategy has been a recurring theme for numerous smaller forces throughout history. Furthermore, the story illuminates the intricate nature of historical figures. No one is solely benevolent or malevolent. Genghis Khan, despite his brutal conquests, exhibited respect for his adversaries' bravery. Conversely, Jalal ad-Din, lauded as a resistance hero, was also responsible for his own massacres. History, therefore, reveals the multifaceted nature of humanity. Finally, the tale underscores the profound significance of resistance itself. Even when defeat appears inevitable, the act of resisting holds intrinsic value. It ignites hope in others, affirms the indomitable nature of the human spirit, and occasionally alters the course of history in unforeseen ways. While we may not confront an empire like the Mongols, each of us encounters our own "10" challenges that seem insurmountable, situations where all logical reasoning points to surrender. Jalal ad-Din's story serves as a powerful reminder that value often resides not in the ultimate outcome, but in the effort expended. Even in defeat, the manner in which we face it carries weight. Courage possesses an immeasurable power to inspire. So the next time an obstacle appears unconquerable, recall a 22-year-old who dared to challenge the planet's mightiest empire with an army of displaced people. Remember his singular triumph at Parwan, and though he ultimately met defeat, his name and narrative endure through the annals of time. If this content provided fresh perspective, inspiration, or simply a compelling narrative, please consider liking and subscribing to support the channel. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What is your opinion on Jalal ad-Din's choice not to abandon the refugees, acknowledging it would impede his army? Was it a sound decision or a strategic misstep? And please share this video so more individuals can learn about this truly extraordinary tale. Thank you for watching. Look forward to seeing you in the next one.